Welcome to the third episode of Doukhobor Life in Canada, Part 2. We will describe the building of Doukhobor settlements in the forested landscapes of British Columbia, including a political landscape that further challenged the Doukhobors. Included in this episode is the progress the independent Doukhobors were making in Saskatchewan as a society of independent Doukhobors. 1908 was a significant year for the Christian Community of Universal Brotherhood, CCUB. They were on the move, leaving Saskatchewan for British Columbia to begin anew yet again. The independent Doukhobors mostly remained in Saskatchewan to continue with their way of life. The Sons of Freedom Doukhobors, smaller in number after the 1902 pilgrimage, remained a part of the CCUB while retaining their understanding of Doukhoborism. In the spring of 1908, Peter the Lordly and a few delegates left for the Kootenay region in BC to consider new lands to rebuild their communal lifestyle. What they saw was a mountainous area and narrow, damp valleys. The land was thickly forested and still under spring snows. The delegates were doubtful about their leader's choice and location in this wilderness. Peter the Lordly reassured them, explaining that the forest could be cleared and the lumber used to build their houses. He exclaimed,
"Our people will find a refuge and a haven among these mountains."
It was there that 5,000 Doukhobors would migrate and settle to build their communities and continue to develop and uphold the Christian Community of Universal Brotherhood. The foundation of the community was based on the motto by Peter the Lordly, "Toil and peaceful life." At that time, Peter the Lordly personally bought the lands in British Columbia and registered the lands in his name. He bequeathed the lands to the community as a whole, and prominent members were named as trustees. Given that this was a private purchase, no oath of allegiance or compliance with the Homestead Act were required. It appeared to be ideal. And so, barely a month after Peter the Lordly purchased the lands in BC, pioneer parties arrived to clear land and build houses for future settlers. Within a year, 1,000 Doukhobors had arrived, and by 1913, more than 5,000 CCUB followers had migrated from Saskatchewan to BC. The following land purchases were made. Large tracts of land were purchased near Castlegar in Udashenya, meaning consolation, west of Grand Forks, named Fructovaya Dolina, meaning fruit valley. In Glade, Pladarodnaya, meaning fertile. A smaller tract of land purchased at Brilliant, just outside of Castlegar, named for the sparkling waters of the Kootenay River. In time, smaller land purchases were made at Champion Creek, named Blahadatnaya, meaning blessed. Shore Acres, named Prekrasnaya, meaning beautiful. Pass Creek, named Lahovaya, meaning meadow. Krastova, named Krastovaya, meaning cross, and several smaller settlements in the Slocan Valley and Nelson areas. By 1912, the total properties held by the CCUB in BC had reached 14,403 acres. In the early years in BC, the Doukhobors worked tirelessly to establish their community. In a short time, the community made significant accomplishments. However, its communal successes were made possible due to the great simplicity and frugality that everyone in the community was required to abide by. The goal of the community was to establish common enterprises and common economy, with all commodities shared and divided as equally as possible. Community accomplishments included orchards and the planting of over 50,000 fruit trees by 1911, flour mills and lumber mills, brickyards, road building, bridges, and of particular note is the Brilliant Suspension Bridge, which serviced the general public. Carpentry and shoemaking shops, blacksmith and metalworking shops, extensive irrigation works and reservoirs, oil pressing plants, apiaries, the development of a cannery and jam factory in Brilliant, BC, the Kootenay-Columbia Preserving Works, and a cannery in Grand Forks. Within the communities were skilled carpenters, blacksmiths, mechanics, machinists, engineers, shoemakers, gardeners, apiarists, weavers, bakers, tailors, veterinarians, and healers. The overall community organization quickly acquired self-sufficiency. The operational center for the CCUB was in Brilliant, near Castlegar, BC. There was a residence for Peter the Lordly, dormitories for the workers, and a grain elevator, library, community store, and other enterprises. This infrastructure was the base to maintain economic and community stability for the members, including elders, those widowed, orphaned, disabled, or sick. For over 25 years, this support system was completely self-sufficient with minimal aid from external sources. Over 90 communal villages were constructed in the West Kootenay and Boundary areas, featuring the communal two-story brick homes. Each home housed about 30 to 50 people. There was a communal kitchen with a big Russian-style oven in which large loaves of bread were baked and meals cooked daily. Each family had one of 8 bedrooms on the top floor with curtains for privacy. Houses were strictly kept clean and neat. The caring of children was a group effort by many aunties and grandmothers. Doukhobor community life was, at that time, austere. Peter the Lordly had an ambitious yet realistic vision of communal life and how to achieve it and sustain it. Building a successful community relied on individual and collective sacrifices of luxuries. Those luxuries included tea, coffee, and sugar. Everyone was required to pull together to support a growing community. Leading a life of simplicity was a value of the Doukhobor way of life, and it also supported steady economic growth. Everyone was expected to live frugally. Forbidden were all musical instruments, bicycles, personal ornaments, and jewelry. Clothing was as simple and inexpensive as possible. In the summer, all the children and many adults went without shoes. The children wore only a single garment, the girls a long dress, and the boys under 12 a shirt reaching to the knees. Simple vegetarian meals were served in a communal manner. Peter the Lordly was involved in every aspect of community life, from the economic and organizational end to the cultural lifestyle and religious and spiritual development. He was the company president as well as the spiritual head of the community. He traveled from village to village, inspecting, negotiating, encouraging, leading prayer meetings and choirs, often wearing an old straw hat and modest clothing. He was often traveling with his constant companion, Anastasia Hulabova. On Sundays, the whole day would be taken up with singing and discussions. You can imagine the Doukhobors coming together in a hillside orchard to sing their rich harmonies for hours under the open sky. The members of the community would gather at dawn to pray and sing. When Peter the Lordly was present, he would engage in discussion on spirituality and politics. His presence was experienced as transformative and uplifting by children and adults. Life in the community was by no means easy. Every person contributed to the maintenance of the community through hard work and living under strict guidelines. There were consequences for those who did not abide by the rules, depending upon the severity of the transgression, from public reprimands to temporary denial of rations, and in more extreme cases, expulsion from the community. With Doukhobor colonies already well established in Saskatchewan and British Columbia, at least a dozen new homesteads were developed in Alberta in 1915 to 1917. The Alberta locations produced grains, vegetables, and hay, as well as raise cattle and Percheron horses for BC's horse logging operations. Alberta became an ideal location for trade with Saskatchewan and BC while shortening trade routes. The Doukhobors anticipated living freely in BC without government interference, especially as there would be no conflict over land, as their land was privately purchased. However, they would face British Columbia's stringent laws when it came to registration, tax regulations, and compulsory schooling. BC laws afforded little consideration to non-conforming minorities, such as the Doukhobors. Compliance was expected, and attempts were made to enforce obedience to existing laws. Meanwhile, the independent Doukhobors in Saskatchewan exercised an integrative approach to education while maintaining their Doukhobor values. Early schools amongst Doukhobor communities in Canada were started between 1899 to 1905 by the Quakers, mostly attended by children of independent Doukhobor households. By 1912, most children from independent Doukhobor homes in Saskatchewan were attending public schools. While they were willing to have their children attend schooling, some disputes still arose. For instance, due to the Doukhobors' religious beliefs, Doukhobors in Blaine Lake filed a petition to the Department of Education disputing the singing of patriotic songs in local schools. By the 1920s, many Doukhobors became employed as educators, held administrative or teaching positions in those same schools, while some were also a part of local school boards. A notable independent Doukhobor, Peter Makaroff, received his education in Quaker schools in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1912, at the age of 17, Makaroff received a provisional certificate to teach in a school near Blaine Lake. With the founding of the Society of Independent Doukhobors, Makaroff became the secretary of the organization. In that same year, he became the first Doukhobor to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Saskatchewan. After saving enough money, he entered law school at the University of Saskatchewan, where he would earn his law degree and become Canada's first Doukhobor lawyer in 1918. He would go on to open his legal practice in that same year. This paved the way for younger generations of Doukhobors to follow similar paths while remaining committed to their Doukhobor heritage and traditions. Independent Doukhobors in Saskatchewan maintained the core tenets of Doukhoborism, including a strong commitment to pacifism based on their belief that the Spirit of God resides in each living being. In 1916, they founded the Society of Independent Doukhobors. The founding of the society helped ensure that they would not be eligible for military conscription. Many independent Doukhobors maintained farming occupations and would go on to integrate into other occupations, which included medical doctors, educators, civil engineers, accountants, dentists, and pharmacists. The Christian community of Universal Brotherhood flourished with its industries and communities because of collective efforts, skill, knowledge, and discipline of young and old. However, even within vast community achievements, the dispossession of their lands that took place in 1907 had almost ruined them. There was a lack of money, and in 1913, they decided to mortgage 16,000 acres of land in British Columbia to receive $200,000 from the Sun Life Company. This did not solve all their financial problems, and debt continued to grow for several years. In episode 4, we will address the challenges the CCUB faced in British Columbia when it came to public schooling and registration, as well as the demise of Peter the Lordly Verrigan.
Нам видит свет души